In early July, Colorado's Monarch Mountain released what has to be one of the most ambitious master plans we've seen for a ski area of its size. And to be honest, we found some serious issues with it. Is Monarch attempting to fly too close to the sun? Join us as we break down everything this perennial underdog is attempting to build and how it could realistically end up. Monarch Mountain is located in central Colorado, further away from major metropolitan areas than resorts along the I-70 corridor. It features a small footprint, an old-school lift fleet, and absolutely zero snowmaking. As such, it's a mountain that has consistently flown under the radar, but has gained a reputation as a quieter alternative to the hustle and bustle of the mega resorts further north. In recent years, Monarch has seen its visitation count climb drastically, as people shun corporate-owned mountains in search of more laid-back and cheaper experiences. Despite an exceptionally poor snow year in 2025-26, the mountain recorded its busiest day ever in January, with large crowds also seen for Powder Days and the opening of No Name Basin. Speaking of which, Monarch opened Colorado's only terrain expansion for 25-26, adding 377 acres to the backside of the mountain. This No Name Basin expansion was a highly anticipated addition to the mountain and increased intermediate and advanced terrain options, along with adding a fixed grip triple to Michi. Between the expansion and the high visitation days, the future looks bright for Monarch. However, as with all ski areas, higher visitation will inevitably lead to greater issues and exposure of some underlying problems Monarch is already dealing with. In order to keep the mountain relevant for decades to come, Monarch submitted and got accepted their 2025 Master Development Plan, which outlines vast modernizations and many supplemental projects to help the ski area grow successfully. We'll take a look at each proposed project, any potential issues with the project, and then discuss how realistic each one is. But before we start looking at the individual projects, we should talk about what exactly a Master Development Plan is and is not. A Master Development Plan, called an MDP for short, is a collection of projects and improvements proposed by a ski resort to take place over a long period of time. For this plan, around 15 years. The MDP serves as a general outline, while each individual project contained within a master plan must gain its own plannings and approvals before it can be implemented. Individual projects can and often do change from the master plan to individual approval and implementation. All that's to say that acceptance of a master development plan by the Forest Service does not equal permission to construct the projects contained within. It just says that the Forest Service agrees with the future vision of the ski area. Master development plans and subsequent projects must be approved by the Forest Service because Monarch sits on Forest Service land, in 2 different forests no less. The mountain operates under a Special Use Permit, or SUP, which indicates a boundary wherein the ski area is allowed to conduct its business. These are long-term leases, but they are not permanent. Finally, there's one more concept to understand: Comfortable Carrying Capacity, or CCC. CCC is determined differently by each ski resort, but it is a representation of how many guests a mountain can accommodate on a reasonably busy day. It is not a hard and fast limit, as most ski resorts exceed their CCC on 5 to 10 days per season. It's just a general guideline primarily used for planning purposes. Alright, with that out of the way, let's discuss the Monarch Master Plan specifically. This master plan is very similar to many others in content and organization, but differs in a few major ways. First of all, it's significantly shorter than many others we've examined in the past. At only 108 pages long, part of that brevity could be attributed to Monarch simply being a smaller mountain than many others. However, another major contributor is the ambiguity contained within. Rather than a concrete plan, many projects list a few different options, allowing for flexibility, but also making interpretation more challenging. The plan is triphasic, with Phase 1 planned for the coming years, Phase 2 from a few years to a decade, and Phase 3 likely not being implemented for at least a decade. Let's dive right in by taking a look at Phase 1. The first projects included in Phase 1 involve improvements to the existing magic carpets. Monarch is an excellent learning hill, and these projects aim to reinforce that by replacing and relocating several magic carpets and surface lifts around the base area. This aims to alleviate the lines seen at Caterpillar in recent years and create a gentler learning progression than currently exists. Another small but highly impactful improvement would be a rope tow running between the top of the Breezeway and Tamichi lifts. Currently, it's extremely flat going from Breezeway to No Name Basin, requiring skating or pushing practically the entire way. This rope tow would make this access much easier. It's unclear whether guests would also be able to ride the rope tow in the other direction to access runs such as Little Mo from Tamichi. If this is the case, it would help decrease congestion on the Shagnasty Trail. Phase 1 would also see some trail improvements. In our experience, Monarch does have an issue with flat spots, more so than similarly sized ski areas elsewhere. To ameliorate this, Skywalker, Sleepy Hollow, and Roundabout would see grading and improvements, as well as the Lower Tango to Pioneer return road. We hope that when they execute this latter grading project, they install new signage along Lower Tango to indicate to unfamiliar guests that they need to take that road to return to the Pioneer lift, lest they end up stuck at the bottom of Garfield. Additionally, 2 new traverses would be cut and graded. The first would be an alternative to Roundabout, which would not extend as far into the Kirikanti area, allowing access to Middle Tango. The more impactful one would be a traverse from the top of Tamichi all the way to Snowburn. This would help facilitate exiting the no-name terrain, and would also contribute to taking pressure off of Shagnasty, which was frequently scraped off and bare due to its sun aspect and high traffic throughout the 25-26 season. The final pieces of Phase 1 would be a handful of facilities upgrades. The Day Lodge would see a much-needed expansion, increasing not only seats for dining guests, but also space for other mountain departments. A new facility would be built in the Pano Flats area, near the bottom of the Panorama lift. This was approved in 1999, but has yet to be implemented. This would likely be the single most impactful project of Phase 1, as Monarch does not currently have any such mid-mountain dining facility. It would take pressure off of the base area, which has been a recurring issue on busy days, and would overall greatly improve the guest experience. And finally, the Ski Patrol would get a new building in the base area in Phase 1 as well. Phase 1 is listed in the plan as having a timeline of 1 to 3 years for build-out, which we find unlikely. However, we do find it likely that all of these projects are constructed. Monarch's willingness to expand its terrain into No Name Basin indicates a willingness to take larger steps to improve the guest experience. Additionally, the newfound traffic on Snowburn from No Name, in addition to recent visitation spikes, have and will continue to place demand for a mid-mountain facility. Thus, while the Pano Flats project has sat dormant for decades, we feel confident that there may now be an impetus for its implementation. So far, nothing in this master plan has particularly jumped off the page. That changes in Phase 2, which features 3 new lifts. Pioneer and Breezeway are both proposed to be replaced, either with detachable or fixed grip quads. Additionally, a brand new alignment called the Divide Express would see a detachable quad running from the base area to the summit of the mountain adjacent to the existing Panorama Top Terminal. These lift replacements could each be transformational, but in the context of the rest of the plan, there are a few potential issues. Jumping ahead to Phase 3 for now, 4 new lifts would be constructed. Panorama and Tumbelina are set to be replaced with detachable or fixed grip quads, and in one of the most questionable proposals of the whole plan, Garfield is planned to be replaced with, quote, another detachable quad or fixed grip double. In addition to all that, a fixed grip or detachable quad would be installed in No Name Basin to the looker's right of the existing Tamichi Triple. Out of all of these lift proposals, we find Breezeway to be the most essential, as it not only serves a popular terrain pod, but also is the primary access to both No Name and Mirkwood basins. As with any other doubles, replacing Breezeway with a fixed grip quad would be successful in increasing capacity, but it would actually increase the ride time from the current lift, as fixed grip quads cannot run as fast as doubles. Notably, this replacement was approved in 1999. Breezeway is starting to get up there in age, so maintenance may require a new lift before Monarch has saved enough to purchase a detachable. However, in a most ideal world, Breezeway would become a detachable quad, hopefully with a little bit more accessible base terminal that does not require an uphill walk to reach from the base area buildings. Perhaps this could be accomplished by the lift having contour loading and clockwise circulation. While Breezeway is simple enough, Monarch's ambiguity in the master plan leads to the full build-out reading as overbuilt and unnecessarily redundant. For example, it would surely not be necessary to construct a high-speed quad in both the Garfield and Pioneer alignments. The same goes for Panorama and Divide. As it stands currently, it is significantly easier to reach the bottom of the Garfield lift from all terrain. Additionally, Pioneer is a much newer lift as it was constructed in 1999. We would argue that of these two, Garfield is a significantly more important lift to replace with a detachable quad. Replacing Pioneer, Monarch's only current quad chair, with another fixed grip quad makes zero sense whatsoever. As such, we would most like to see Garfield replaced with a detachable. Panorama serves its own distinct terrain pod, and as the only mid-mountain lift on the front side, allows guests to avoid returning to the congested base area. One can get quick, easy laps on the Panorama terrain without having to take a congested green runout. Meanwhile, the proposed Divide Express would originate from the base area as the fifth lift there. For context, Breckenridge's busiest base area, Peak 8, has 4 lifts. Monarch's base area on busy days is absolute chaos. Remember, Monarch is a learning mountain, so there are first-timers left, right, and center, along with parents and little kids walking around in the snow. Additionally, if the Divide lift was built and Panorama was replaced, it would cause significant congestion issues at the summit area. For all of these reasons, we would greatly prefer to see Panorama replaced with a detachable quad over the construction of the Divide Express. However, our interpretation of the master plan's wording about the Divide lift is that it is heavily favored as one of the first projects of Phase 2 to be built, as it would provide the mountain with a signature lift that could also eventually contribute to summer operations. So with all that in mind, our most ideal lift replacement scenario would see Garfield, Panorama, and Breezeway replaced with high-speed quads. To elevate itself to one of the best learning experiences in Colorado, Monarch choosing a detachable quad to replace Tumbelina could also prove critical. This would follow the trend of ski areas installing detachables, which are much easier to load and unload in their learning areas in order to attract learners to return to their mountain. If constructed, this would result in Monarch having 3 high-speed quads out of the base area and 1 higher up on the mountain, which would be an extremely competitive lift fleet for a mountain of its size. If we had to prioritize, we would say that Breezeway is top, followed by Panorama, Tumbelina, and then Garfield. Far, far down the line, a twin to Tamichi could be useful in No Name to provide redundancy for any lift breakdowns, along with increasing capacity. To not overcrowd the area, and for homogeneity of maintenance, an identical Skytrack triple would be our pick. This would be the last priority of the new lifts. Of course, all of this logistical talk still leaves out one other major issue. If Monarch starts constructing multiple detachable lifts, what does that say about Monarch's atmosphere going forwards? Monarch is known for being grounded, a place for people to go old school skiing without the grandeur or hustle of huge resorts like Breckenridge, Vail, and Aspen. If Monarch constructs a Breezeway or Panorama detachable quad, it would give them that signature lift the plan seems so desperate for, likely without majorly transforming the character of the mountain. But if 3 or 4 or a base to summit detachable is constructed, what does that say about the audience that Monarch is trying to attract? At that point, Monarch graduates from an under-the-radar alternative to a full-on Denver competitor. And while the modernization may look attractive on paper, we believe that the induced demand would outgrow the capacity increases quite rapidly. That small hill local charm exists equally in part due to the mountain itself and the people who ski it. And if this plan is fully built out, both of those aspects will likely be changed for good. Now, realistically speaking, these lifts will not all be built. What we find most likely is that the Divide detachable quad is built and not much else. Some of the doubles may get replaced with fixed grips as they become too costly to maintain due to their age, but we don't envision new lifts at nearly this scale. Of course, this slate of lift replacements, even if only partially built, is going to prompt some significant downstream effects. At current conditions, the comfortable carrying capacity of the hill is limited by parking capacity. However, at full build-out, the mountain's CCC would be primarily constrained by food service seat capacity. The 2 biggest issues we've personally found at Monarch are exactly those: cafeteria capacity and the parking mess and subsequent traffic. As demonstrated by the CCC, while this plan goes big time with the new lifts, it doesn't address the parking and dining issues at an equivalent scale. Additionally, at full build-out, trail crowding would be a concern at the summit of Divide and Panorama, at the top of Pioneer and Garfield, and at the base area. However, as we said, it is highly unlikely that we'll see full build-out, and as such, these downstream effects are mostly mitigated with the other projects proposed in the plan. Back in Phase 2, the Rentals and Children's Center, Maintenance Shop, and Wastewater Treatment Plant would all see replacement or expansion in order to accommodate higher demand. The rental center could be impactful, though likely not the flashiest upgrade. Also in Phase 2, the Paradise parking lot would be greatly expanded. This would require an adjustment of the SUP boundary on the Pike San Isabel National Forest side of the mountain. It remains to be seen how keen the Forest Service would be on opening up more land for Monarch to clear out for parking. However, even if parking is expanded, it remains to be seen if Monarch can do anything to improve the traffic seen on US 50 on busy mornings, The slow parking process can result in it taking well over an hour to get from Garfield to a parking spot on the worst days. The only way to address this issue that we could identify would be to have parking attendants fill multiple rows or lots simultaneously. Phase 3 would see a more modest parking expansion, with more spots along the entrance and exit rows. It would see the tubing operations relocated to make space for new teaching terrain where it currently exists. It would see a small hut, approved back in 1999, with some basic food service at the top of Panorama, along with a pair of yurts that also have basic food service. One of the yurts would be designed for Nordic and cat skiing and would be located within another SUP boundary adjustment further to the north of the current boundary. This would be all new terrain dedicated to Nordic trails below the current Mirkwood Basin zone. To go along with the new Nordic trails, a new Nordic Center building would take shape in the base area. The other yurt would be at the top of North Star. This is a hike-to glade zone in No Name Basin. I will say that again. This would be a hike-to yurt. The master plan says, quote, "It will have some simple food and beverage offerings, a separate composting toilet building, some seating space, and potentially an outdoor deck." This is questionable, to say the least. If the intent is to add a small space to No Name Basin, there are plenty of other places that make sense. But putting a yurt, with food service no less, at the top of a hike-to, hard-to-find, experts-only glade zone does not make any conventional sense. To go along with attracting a new audience for Nordic skiing, Monarch also describes summer zones and activities that could eventually take place in each zone. It is unlikely that they will implement any summer operations throughout the lifespan of this master plan, although in our opinion it would be beneficial for them to. Ski resorts across the continent have been increasingly adopting summer activities, many with decent success, to keep a revenue stream throughout the off-season. As winters get more volatile, this would be especially beneficial to smaller ski areas such as Monarch. Finally, Phase 3 features one of the most weighted proposals in this plan: snowmaking. Monarch prides itself on not using any man-made snow, and despite having had it approved for the Sleepy Hollow, Glade, Freeway, and Little Joe trails since 1999, the mountain has never had to implement a snowmaking system. Even in such a poor snow year as 2025-26, the Mountain Ops team was able to do an impressive job at keeping the mountain in decent shape and getting terrain open. It would not surprise us to see Monarch construct more snow fences, particularly in the top of No Name Basin, to continue harvesting natural snow. Nonetheless, the mountain has made it clear that snowmaking remains a last resort. However, should they need to construct a system, the snowmaking pond and pump station would be adjacent to the bottom of the Gun Barrel Run, and snowmaking would cover not only those previously approved trails, but also Romp to Sidewinder to Lower Tango, Great Divide to Tickaboo, Docks Run, and Little Mo. We do foresee limited snowmaking being implemented eventually, but it likely will not be in the coming seasons. So yeah, for such a small mountain, Monarch certainly has big dreams. Maybe a bit too big. We hope that this plan is intentionally overly ambitious. After all, we believe that Monarch will be in its sweet spot if they build out some, but not all, of the plan. If we see a high-speed quad or two, the Pano Flats cafeteria, and a parking expansion, Monarch will be fully in their element. But if they push too far beyond that, they risk becoming what they currently compete against. At the end of the day, Monarch is too small to truly become the next Breckenridge, and without any terrain expansions in the plan, it likely won't look drastically different 20 years from now than it does today. But the level of aspiration elucidated in this plan flies dangerously close to hubris. Only time will tell what version of Monarch we get by the time their next master plan is published. Of course, we'd love to hear any and all of your thoughts about this plan down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video or found it informative, please consider subscribing to help support this stream. Now go check out one of our other master plan breakdowns for a bigger resort like Copper Mountain or a smaller hill like Ski Cooper. As always, thank you all so much for watching. All my love, I'm out.